On the night of July 31st, 1976, a 13-year-old girl named Cynthia Driggers, who was only 3 days away from her 14th birthday, was asleep in her bedroom at her family's home in Winter Garden, Florida. Her family was asleep in the same house. Her mother was just down the hall. She was supposed to be safe. She was not safe. Her uncle had snuck back into the house after a night of drinking and smoking marijuana with friends. He climbed through the dining room window, crept through the house, and went straight to her room. He raped her. And when she told him she was going to tell her mother what he had done, he grabbed her by the neck, dragged her outside, beat her, and strangled her to death. He left her body in the bushes outside the house, went back inside, took a shower, and went to bed. Her name was Cynthia Driggers. She was 13 years old. His name is James Ernest Hitchcock. He is 70 years old. And on April 30th, 2026, nearly 50 years after he murdered that little girl, the state of Florida executed him. This is the full story. James Ernest Hitchcock has just been executed in Florida for the crime he committed in 1976, when he was 20 years old. The rape and murder of his 13-year-old stepniece, Cynthia Driggers, on the night of July 31, 1976. James Hitchcock was born in Arkansas on April 5, 1956, and grew up together with 6 siblings in Manila, Arkansas. During his childhood, his family lived in a shack and made a living picking cotton. When James Hitchcock was 6 years old, his father contracted skin cancer and died. He grew up poor, largely without structure, and by his early adult years he was already in trouble with the law. By the time the murder occurred, James Hitchcock was jobless and out on parole for a burglary conviction. He had no stable home, no income, and no real plan. In July of 1976, James Hitchcock moved to Winter Garden, Florida, to live with his brother as a 20-year-old fresh out of an Arkansas prison. His brother's family took him in. They gave him a place to sleep. One of the members of that household was his brother's 13-year-old stepdaughter, Cynthia Driggers. He had been living in that house for about 2 weeks when he killed her. The evening before the murder, July 30th, 1976, was an ordinary one inside the Richard James Hitchcock household. James Hitchcock watched television with his brother's family until 11 p.m. before going out drinking and smoking marijuana with friends in Winter Garden. He only returned home at about 2:30 a.m. He entered the house through the dining room window before going back to his bedroom. But he didn't stay in his bedroom. Afterwards, James Hitchcock entered the room of Cynthia Driggers, where he raped her. When it was over, Cynthia told him she was hurt, and that she was going to tell her mother what he had done to her. James Hitchcock proceeded to grab her by the neck and brought her outside. He tried to convince her not to tell anyone about the rape. But Cynthia resisted and yelled. James Hitchcock then choked and beat her before he strangled her to death. After the murder, James Hitchcock left the body inside the bushes before he went back to the house to shower and go to bed. The next morning, Cynthia's body was found in those bushes outside the home where her family slept. What investigators would later uncover made the crime even more disturbing. Before she was murdered, Cynthia had already told her younger sister Lynn that James Hitchcock had been doing inappropriate things to her. Lynn tried to get her sister to tell their mother. When they told James Hitchcock they were going to tell their mother what he was doing, he threatened to rape and kill both girls. He had been threatening them both before the night he killed Cynthia Driggers. Cynthia Driggers, known to her family simply as Cindy, was 13 years old when she was murdered. She was the stepdaughter of James Hitchcock's brother, and she was sleeping in her own room the night he came into her room. Her younger sister Lynn Cobb was only 16 months younger than Cindy and was present the day of the murder. Lynn was a child herself, barely 12 years old, living in that same house, on the same night, fully aware of what James Hitchcock had been doing to her older sister, and too frightened to say anything. Lynn did not tell anyone what had happened at the time of the investigation because she was afraid that she would be killed too. She carried that fear for years. Cindy's mother spent decades hoping to see justice served for her daughter. When Governor DeSantis signed Hitchcock's death warrant in 2026, Driggers' mother stated her wish for James Hitchcock to be executed for murdering her daughter. Driggers' younger sister Lynn stated that the decades of legal processes dragged on and her sister's murder felt like an inescapable loop. A female cousin of Driggers stated that the family had waited 50 years for justice to be served, and implied that two of their surviving family members hoped to live longer than Hitchcock. Cindy never got the chance to grow up. She never got the chance to become an adult, to have a life of her own, to put what he did to her behind her. She was 13 years old, in her own bedroom, in the house where her mother slept. And the man her family had brought in off the street walked into her room in the middle of the night, and took everything from her. The body was found and James Hitchcock was arrested as a suspect the next day after the murder. He was formally charged on August 5, 1976, 5 days after the killing. When questioned, James Hitchcock initially confessed to being involved. But when the case went to trial, he changed his story entirely. During the trial, James Hitchcock recanted his confession and claimed that Cynthia had voluntarily had sex with him, and that his brother Richard Hitchcock had discovered this and killed Cynthia in a fit of rage. James Hitchcock claimed he had only confessed in order to cover up for his brother. The jury did not believe him. James Hitchcock was initially convicted of first-degree murder and was sentenced to death by the electric chair on February 11, 1977. But the legal process that followed would stretch for nearly 5 decades, becoming one of the longest and most contested capital cases in Florida history. In 1982, the Florida Supreme Court denied his direct appeal. That same year, the U.S. Supreme Court also refused to hear his case. In 1983, Governor Bob Graham signed a death warrant scheduling James Hitchcock for execution by electric chair on May 18, 1983. On May 17, 1983, the eve of his scheduled execution, a federal judge accepted the appeals of the defense and issued a stay of execution. He came within 24 hours of death and walked away. Then in 1987, Hitchcock's case made national legal history. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled in James Hitchcock v. Driggers that capital sentencers may not be blocked from considering relevant, mitigating evidence. That ruling led directly to new sentencing hearings for James Hitchcock, and became a key precedent in American capital law, cited in cases across the country for decades afterward. The resentencing hearings followed. In the 1988 resentencing, the jury voted 7-5 for death. In 1993, a third jury voted unanimously, 12-0, for death. And in 1996, a fourth jury voted 10-2 for death. For separate juries. For separate death sentences. Across nearly 20 years of retrials, still the execution wasn't carried out immediately. Through every single one of those hearings, James Hitchcock maintained the same story, that his brother had committed the murder. During the 1988 resentencing, the defense called 8 fellow death row inmates to testify that James Hitchcock was a nice person and a peacemaker throughout his time on death row. James Hitchcock himself took the stand again and continued to insist that the real murderer was his brother Richard Hitchcock. The courts were still not persuaded. Following his original 1977 sentencing, James Ernest Hitchcock was placed on Florida's death row, where he would remain for the next 49 years. By January 2019, James Hitchcock was the longest-serving prisoner on death row for crimes committed in Central Florida. As of 2026, he was the 4th longest-serving death row prisoner in the entire state of Florida. The man who came to his brother's house as a 20-year-old fresh out of prison was now 70 years old, having spent virtually his entire adult life behind bars. Then on March 31, 2026, Governor Ron DeSantis signed James Hitchcock's death warrant. The execution was scheduled for April 30, 2026, at 6 p.m. at Florida State Prison near Starke. When the family of Cynthia Driggers received the news, they felt a mixed sense of relief and a painful recalling of the tragedy. Cindy's cousin, Jaime Meadows, had spent years pressing state officials for movement in the case, traveling to Tallahassee and demanding answers. St. Lucie County Judge Robert Meadows, who was also Driggers' cousin, revealed that his background in the judiciary meant he was often asked why there had been such a lengthy delay in the case, and that he found it difficult to give a reply. 50 years. That is the distance between the night Cynthia Driggers was murdered in her own home and the date the state of Florida set for the execution of the man convicted of killing her. His attorneys made their final legal moves. The Florida Supreme Court denied an appeal to halt the execution on April 24, 2026. His attorneys had argued that he was innocent and that the state had illegally refused to grant him access to public records related to the death penalty. The U.S. Supreme Court denied a further appeal on the morning of April 30, 2026, the day of the scheduled execution. Every legal door had been closed. On the morning of April 30, 2026, James Ernest Hitchcock woke up at Florida State Prison at 4:45 a.m. The execution was set for 6 p.m. that evening. He would be Florida's 6th execution of 2026. He had one visitor during the day, believed to be a cousin. His last meal was salad, chicken, ice cream, pie, and soda. By 6 p.m., it was time. The curtain to the death chamber opened promptly at the scheduled 6 p.m. execution time. Hitchcock's entire body was covered in a sheet up to his head. He lay there staring at the ceiling as the team warden made a call, then asked him for his final statement. His final words were brief. He said, "Just to say goodbye to Joshua, my friend. Thanks for all you've done." He said nothing about Cynthia Driggers. He said nothing about her family. He said nothing about the crime. As he spoke, a man in the witness room raised his hand, and Hitchcock lifted his head to try to see him. Those were the last words James Ernest Hitchcock ever spoke. The drugs began flowing. James Hitchcock blinked rapidly and took several deep breaths. A minute later, his breathing became more shallow and quickly stopped. About 3 minutes into the execution, the team warden briefly flicked Hitchcock's face, yelled his name twice, and shook his shoulders. There was no response. His face slowly turned ashen, his lips purple. 28 witnesses watched from nearby. Not one of them visibly reacted. A doctor entered the chamber 11 minutes into the execution. He checked Hitchcock with a stethoscope, shone a light into his eyes, and then nodded at the team warden. James Ernest Hitchcock was pronounced dead at 6:12 p.m. on April 30, 2026. James Ernest Hitchcock was 20 years old when he committed that crime. He was 70 years old when the state of Florida executed him for what he did to Cynthia and Driggers on the night of July 31, 1976. It was Florida's 6th execution of 2026. His execution took place nearly 50 years after the crime occurred, following multiple decades of appeals and 3 separate resentencing trials. After the execution, members of Cynthia Driggers' family stepped forward to speak to reporters outside Florida State Prison. Cindy's younger sister, Lynn Cobb, the same little girl who had been just 12 years old the night her sister was murdered, who had been too frightened to speak for years, stood before the cameras and spoke about her sister. She said Cindy had added life, fun, and dreams to their family in the 13 short years she was alive. She said, "I thank God for giving me the strength and courage all these years and shaping me even through this tragedy for the person I am today. We now close the door on this chapter of our lives. We will continue to remember Cindy by keeping her memory alive and always understanding that life is precious and time is valuable." Cindy's cousin Jaime Meadows, who had spent years pressing officials in Tallahassee to move the case forward, said simply that Hitchcock never thought this day would come. But he was wrong. Not everyone agreed with the outcome. Advocacy group Floridians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty issued a statement after the execution, arguing that an innocent man had been killed. They maintained that Hitchcock's brother Richard had committed the murder, and that Hitchcock had only taken responsibility for the sexual contact that night, not the killing. The group called Florida's death penalty system irretrievably broken. The courts across nearly 5 decades saw it differently. 4 separate juries, across 4 separate sentencing proceedings, returned the same verdict. The evidence presented at trial was consistent and conclusive. Not a single court across any level of the American legal system, state or federal, ultimately ruled in Hitchcock's favor on the question of guilt. Florida's death row still holds nearly 250 inmates. The next scheduled execution is set to happen on May 21, 2026. Whether this execution represents justice, and what kind of justice it is something I will have to hear from you in the comments below. If this story is one you feel deserves to be heard, share it. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And subscribe for more stories told the way they deserve to be told. If you're a lover of creepy true crime stories, true crime documentaries, horror crime, unsolved mysteries and the rest, you can do well to check out our twin channel Mysterious Dark Files for more videos like that.